Well, hello there. So I am continuing on with my project to complete The Neon Wilderness by Nelson Algren, a series of short stories that he wrote, and I'm reading them and uploading them to my channel. I am not a professional reader. The title of this story is called The Children. 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, the third floor guard hung a bright wall motto above the piano in the playroom. I grow old learning something new each day. States Kazuba stood studying the motto while fingering a 5-and-dime toothbrush hanging by a string about his throat. About him stood 9 other youths, in varying attitudes of spiritlessness, each in the same gray clothes. They were waiting for a rehearsal of their Thanksgiving Day play to be offered, ultimately, to the ladies of the Polonia Women's Federation. Until the arrival of that group's representatives, the boys had a few moments in which to scoff at the new motto. Kazumba alone refused to scoff. In fact, he began reproaching the scoffers. It says just right, he told them. Every day you could learn up something new if you just stay on your toes. Look at me, here for larceny of a V8. But if I'd learned up something new, I wouldn't be here for no theft at all. I'd be here for tampering is all. It'd be a misdemeanor is all, like when you strong-arm or rob a guy and it's just malicious mischief. Yeah, the boy called Silly Louie offered, like when it's a dame and then she says you statutory raped her. 3 overdressed women bustled in behind the guard and the talk stopped dead. One of the women twirled the piano stool downward and ran her fingers down the keyboard. States had seen her play at a dance. He had watched the dancing through an alley window. He watched her pull the stool up in an effort to circumvent her bosom till he couldn't see the stool for the spread of the hips. The stubby hands poised dramatically above the keys, and she glanced sidewise without turning her head, like a hen, to see that no one was slouching. Each boy laid his hand on the shoulder of the boy ahead. All right, boys, Indian braves. The 2 other women in the guard applauded lackadaisically. The piano began with a bang, and States led his tribe, loping indifferently, onto the uncarpeted stage. The planks bent under their feet as they circled it. Then they faced an imaginary foe in attitudes of Comanches drawing Comanche bows, and sang half-heartedly, 10 little Indian braves are we, none but the birds so free as we. Some song, States murmured sullenly to Silly Louie. What were the crows always coming around to rub things in for? His tribe loped in a heavy-footed war dance, slapping their mouths with their palms. Aye-yi, aye-yi, aye-yi. Some Indians, he added from the corner of his mouth, nodding toward the 3 Negroes at the end of the line, and wondered vaguely why they couldn't be paratroopers for a change. The pianist waved absently, and the braves became squaws. 10 little Indian squaws at home. Grind the wheat, grind the corn. She brought the pedal down hard on corn, bent over an imaginary urn, grinding imaginary corn. States eyed the wall motto furtively. If you wanted to use phony dice, slip them to a sucker and let the sucker make the passes. Ride with him for a half a dozen passes, then grab your hat and let the sucker try talking his own way out. Let the suckers take the beatings. That's what suckers were for. All right, boys. Papooses now. It makes them forget their little troubles, the guard explained to the ladies. The boys bowed their heads to their knees and murmured, Sleep, little Indians, safe from harm. Daddy's a-hunting the wild fawn. Daddy's a-hunting a wild skirt is all, States offered under his breath. Silly Louie's hands flew to his mouth. When Louie started giggling, he couldn't stop. The piano paused, and the guard's earnest voice dropped discreetly. Then everything stopped but the papooses' persistent murmuring. They rose heavily, one by one, and began a disordered, out-of-tune clomping, toothbrushes bobbing, and went on clomping bravely to minimize Louie's irrepressible tittering. Stop, Hiawatha, stop! Come here! The pianist was plainly outraged. Silly Louie came to the edge of the stage, his hands holding his stomach. He turned his head away and regained his self-control, only with an effort. What were you laughing at this time, Louie? I taught us something funny. Thought. Louis, not taught. Yes'm, I taught you something real funny. Well, go back to your place and pay more attention to the play and less to Kazuba, or you can't be Hiawatha on Thanksgiving. Then, to reproach them both with a single blow, I thought you could be depended upon, Louis. It helps them forget their little troubles, the guard repeated vaguely. They're all looking forwards to Thanksgiving. He was an aging Norwegian with a heavy head and a paunch, who had been a truant officer until his legs had gone bad. Between illness and poverty, he felt somehow that the children had tricked him. During waking hours, he controlled an impulse to strike out blindly at the sight of them, as though by punishing one or two he might get a bit of his own back. Although he never acknowledged this impulse to himself, he dreamed persistently of triumphs over the children. In such dreams he was often a distinguished jurist who sat sentencing children to incredible punishments. One night he sentenced an 8-year-old girl to hard labor for life for thumbing her nose at him. He announced her sentence with a rollicking disregard of her offense, then cursed her obscenely while in the back rows men and women applauded. They loved him for expressing the hatred and fear that they secretly had long shared toward the children. We let them keep their little toothbrushes when they leave from St. Charles, he said aloud to the ladies. Then he spied States sneering at the pianist and called out sternly, "Watch each other, boys, not too close together." After the rehearsal, the ladies signed the guest book in the chapel under a motto that read, "Unless one tries, one cannot succeed." And the pianist herself observed, looking at the holy pictures on the walls, that she just couldn't see how any child could do anything bad after being in here. The aging guard said he didn't understand it either, and hoped they'd all quit doing bad things pretty soon. After dark, the boys lay in the dormitory and spoke in whispers, for it was Wednesday night, and there were no lights on Wednesday, and no speaking was permitted when there were no lights. The cots in the dormitory were numbered in bright, bald tin, and the pillows lay alternately at the foot and at the head of each cot. Thus each boy slept facing his neighbor's feet, the even-numbered ones with their feet to the wall, and the odd-numbered ones with their feet to the aisle. "I'd like to be a paratrooper and just fly around," silly Louis was saying dreamily to himself. "If you ever catch more'n one finger," States cautioned him hoarsely, "play ball with the cops. 'Cause if you just cop a plea for the one you got caught in, when you done your stretch, they'll show up with due process. And that's when they make you stand separate trial for the ones you didn't get caught on. You ought to cop a plea for all of 'em in the first place. It don't take no more time, and you get 'em all settled for keeps. Now, it don't make no difference," States went on gravely, "whether your rod is loaded or not. You'll do time for having criminal intent all the same. The only diff is, if your rod is loaded, you get a chance to do it in the pen instead of the worky, and that's where you get all the breaks. Down there you do it on your ear and no trouble at all. You gotta watch out for yourself these days." "I wouldn't want to carry no rod, though," silly Louis confessed. "I want to be a paratrooper and just fly around." States dismissed Louis's flighty ambitions. "All right, then, so you're a strong-arm merchant instead. You go in for raw-jaw and mayhem, Louis, like commandos. Then you know what you do if you catch a finger?" Silly Louis didn't know that either. Silly Louis didn't know anything. "Well, then I'll tell you. You plead D&D, that's drunk and disorderly. Say you're drunk and fighting. It's like malicious mischief too, sort of. Catch on? Get it, you?" Poor Louis did not answer. He had dropped off to sleep. States continued his conversation with himself, reviewing all the angles in his mind, brushing up on his law, planning for his post-war future. He heard the passing of the Ogden Avenue cars and the coughing of a city dredge down Roosevelt Road, heard the endless crying of a freight train going somewhere all night long. And all the sounds of night seemed like sounds going always away from home, all night. "Always use a blue steel," he warned himself hurriedly, thinking and planning fast now to keep down the fear of the night and the streets rising in him. "They can see the nickel plate kind in the dark. Them 38 policeman specials is the best. But with the nickel plate kind, that's how you wind up with your little toes curled up in a ditch when they see it in the dark." He felt himself growing sleepy, and with his last waking thoughts, promised himself happier times. "When I get to St. Charles," he assured himself, "I'm going to learn up something new every day, all right. When I come out, I'll be like a commando all on my own. I'll be my own army, and then they'll all better look out." Silly Louie tittered softly in his sleep, as though he were dreaming that states had to be Hiawatha instead of himself on Thanksgiving Day. The end.